one of the ways that we really feel like we need to, that we keep our culture strong is even though we're at 9 locations, and some of those locations are actually an hour and a half from our central campus, every week we have staff meeting. And in that staff meeting, when we share celebration stories and good reports, we're constantly pointing them back to one of those leadership values.
This is the L3 Leadership Podcast, episode number 158. What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast. My name is Doug Smith, and I'm the founder of L3 Leadership. We're a leadership development company devoted to helping you become the best leader that you can be. If you're new to the podcast, just know that we're committed to bringing you 3 or 4 episodes every single month to help you grow and develop as a leader. One will always be from our leadership events that we host. One will be an interview that I do with a high-level leader. And then once a month, you'll get a personal leadership lesson by me. If you've been with us for a while and you're enjoying the podcast, I would appreciate if you would subscribe and leave a rating and review on iTunes or whatever you listen to podcasts through. It really does make a difference. And also just share on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn, or wherever you're at. It really helps us get the word out. So anything that you do, I really appreciate, and I just thank you so much for listening. In today's interview, you're going to get to hear part 2 of my interview with Jolie Mullins, senior pastor of Christ Fellowship Church in West Palm Beach, Florida. This is a church I've been following for years and just love what her and her husband Todd are doing, and their leadership's phenomenal. It was such an honor to get to spend time with her, and I can promise you that you're going to love her and love her content. And again, I broke this into 2 parts. You can listen to part 1 if you missed it in episode number 157, and in that episode, you're going to get to hear Jolie talk about her advice for women in leadership, how to handle the tension between being a mom and building a ministry, how to make it in leadership over the long haul, and how to pull off a successful leadership transition. In this specific episode, you're going to get to hear Jolie talk about organizational leadership, how to develop and sustain culture, some of her favorite books, her advice to her younger self, how to have hard conversations, and more. But before we jump into that, just a few announcements. Hey guys, I just want to take a minute and talk to you about L3 Leadership membership. I want to encourage you to become a member of L3 Leadership. The reason why I think you need to become a member is because I believe every leader needs a group of leaders to go through life with that will encourage them, hold them accountable to their goals, and help them reach their potential. At L3 Leadership, we've developed that community of leaders, and they will help you do just that. And so as a member of L3 Leadership, you'll actually get access to that community of leaders. You'll have the ability to join a mastermind group, which I believe is absolutely critical to your success. I think every leader needs to be in a mastermind group. And you'll get access to additional resources, extra content, and a member-only forum on our website. And it's a great way to support L3 Leadership as well. Again, it costs money to run podcasting and all the things that we do. And so again, it's another way to partner with us and say, I believe in what you're doing. Thank you. Membership's only $25 a month, and you can sign up and learn more at l3leadership.org/membership. I want to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers. They are a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny. My wife and I actually got our engagement and wedding rings through Henny Jewelers, and they're just an incredible company. Not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. John gave Laura and I a book to help us prepare for our marriage, and he's been investing in me as a leader, a father, and a husband now for years, and I'm so grateful for that. So if you're in need of a good jeweler, check out hennyjewelers.com. And I want to thank our other sponsor, Alex, to Land and Real Estate Resources. Alex is a full-time realtor with Keller Williams Realty, whose team is committed to providing clients with highly effective premier real estate experiences throughout the greater Pittsburgh region. He's a member and a supporter of L3 Leadership and would love the opportunity to connect with you. You can find out more at pittsburghpropertyshowcase.com. All right, with all that being said, let's jump right into the interview with Jolie. Enjoy, and I'll be back at the end with a few announcements. I do want to talk about organizational culture. I know you guys are very passionate about building a healthy church, and I don't know what it was like during the transition. Did you guys kind of create a new culture? Did you just add to the culture? But can you just give us a vision of what you view a healthy culture as, and then how you specifically build that?
Right. Okay. So there's a lot we could talk about here, but if I were to look back when we were one church meeting in one location and Dad was the senior pastor, we did have a strong culture of servant leadership, of unity, of integrity, healthy ministry flowing from the inside out. And so we had this strong culture. So much of it was caught and not taught, because we were all together in one place. Our team wasn't that big. And if we had to make, any big decisions, it was easy to get all the pastors around the table and we could all kind of talk that out together. But as we grew, we knew that we needed to be more intentional about being able to communicate our culture so that it didn't get diluted as we grew and expanded, but it actually grew stronger, as we launched campuses and added so many more people. So we know that every church and every organization has a culture. It's either by design or by default, right? And so we're either going to design our culture and be intentional about it, or it's going to be what happens. And actually, we had a great culture, but it was really, just what was happening just naturally. And as we grew, we knew that we needed to be more intentional about designing the culture that we wanted to see, because what we saw is as we started building more campuses, that the culture started getting diluted. And so so there were certain things that were already existing in the culture when we transitioned, and there were certain things that we wanted to see in the culture. And so for us, we began the process of really articulating our core beliefs. Obviously, culture is built on of a people that's centered around strong core beliefs, and ours are very similar to many of the churches that are represented here. But it's also our core values, our core beliefs, our core values, our vision, right? That we're all championing the same vision. And so, we wanted to, as a church family, to be able to articulate that in a way that our whole church family could grab onto it. So we all have our core beliefs, and we know what those are. But then there's our vision that we are called to impact our world with the love and the message of Jesus Christ. And our church family can champion. And, if we started on the platform, what's our mission statement? And they would all say it, and bringing radical transformation to the region. And then we knew we needed to articulate our core values. And we had, many core values, and they kind of got added on as the years went on. But we narrowed our core values down to 5. And it was all for one, grow to go, inside out, live to give, and passion for people. And those core values we actually unpack in our journey class, which is our membership class. And you will see those, championed all around our church campus. You'll see them on the walls. You hear us speak about them from the platform. And those are the things, those values that as a church we rally around. And I could unpack all of those, but I think in the last few years, what we really recognized was that even though our church could champion those, there were certain things from our leaders and our staff team that we expected that really weren't separate from those core values, but they were kind of like a drop-down menu, right? That these were things that we celebrated when we saw, and that if we saw something that was different, that those are the things that we ended up calling out, right? So we'd see things that we liked, and these were they became like the intangibles. Well, that's not the Christ Fellowship way. Oh, wow. I went to this campus and it was so the Christ Fellowship way. And we're like, wow, this just feels a little vague. What is Todd and I began to ask ourselves the question, what is the Christ Fellowship way? And what we realized was there were certain intangibles and that were hard to articulate, that we needed to articulate so that our team got it, so that they understood, why, what made things, what made things the way that they were, and what we needed to do together. So we began to establish our leadership values, and those are the things that described our culture, right? They're descriptive and prescriptive. They describe our culture, the things that we saw. When we saw them, we celebrate, but they also prescribed what we wanted to see. So we recognized that when we saw people being servant leaders, those are the stories that got celebrated. And so we are, one of our leadership values, as we talked to our team, was that we want to be servants and stewards first. That above everything else that we do at Christ Fellowship, that we do it with a servant heart, because Jesus himself came to serve and to give. We also realized that we do value excellence, right? Because our excellence will increase our influence. And so, because we walk in places, we might walk into a meeting or into a campus, and we saw that things weren't done to a certain level of excellence, and some of our leaders may not have known that we actually value excellence, and excellence will increase your influence. And we started to articulate these 10 core lessons and core leadership values, actually leader values that we began to unpack, and we began to teach them to our team, celebrate them with our team, and then and make sure that they got in the water, deep into the water of our staff and team. Even our new staff orientation, is centered around many of these leader values.
Yeah. With that, talking about excellence, this is a question from Matt Keller I thought was excellent. He said, you have 9 locations. How do you maintain quality and excellence when you're never there? I know you mentioned you might pop in and speak, but how do you maintain that? 9 places. You're never there.
9 places. I would say that the key has been these leader values. And so that our leaders on our staff teams, when they, that we have articulated those very well, and now we've asked them to articulate those to their teams. So a big point, this is also about how to keep one of the ways that we really feel like we need to that we keep our culture strong is even though we're at 9 locations, and some of those locations are actually an hour and a half from our central campus, every week we have staff meeting. And in that staff meeting, when we share celebration stories and good reports, we're constantly pointing them back to one of those leadership values. Oh man, I love how, Pastor Matt was just such a servant and steward in this situation, and our passion for people, wow, it's really about the one, right? Even though there may have been 500 saved this weekend, and that one story, that one life story articulates, our passion for people. So every week we have staff meeting where we share good reports, right? And all of our campuses are represented, and we celebrate those. We're constantly reinforcing those leadership values. And then in those times too, we're intentionally teaching those leader values and then challenging them to keep those in the water with their team. And so I really believe that has been, that standard of excellence. And even organizationally, I think the way that we're structured, that we have a campus expression, but our central support is able to support them well, and that there's a central philosophy that helps drive the execution at the campuses.
That's great. With the time that we have left, I want to jump into what I've been calling the lightning round, just some fun personal questions, and then just some open-ended questions. First question would just be, what books do you find yourself giving away most often to leaders? And we'll just start there.
Yeah. So the books I give away the most often, I think that whatever the latest, greatest John Maxwell book is, because John Maxwell is getting better and better, and he's getting ready to he's just rewritten How to Develop the Leader Within and How to Develop the Leaders Around You. He's rewritten them because he continues to grow. And like I said, I think he's better in this season than he's ever been before. And he's such a model of growing as a leader. So anything by John Maxwell. I love Bobby Houston's book, Stay the Path, because it talks about going the distance in ministry. And I think her insights for men and women are beautiful. For young leaders, I'm almost always recommending Ask It from Andy Stanley. It's actually the rewrite of The Best Question Ever, which I think really is the best question ever. And I've given that to so many young leaders because I think there's a gap between the expectation of the role that they're in and the wisdom that they need in ministry. And I believe that this book really fills that gap. And I love John Ortberg. He has a book called Soul Care that I think is beautiful as you take care of the inner soul, because really healthy, vibrant ministry flows from the inside out. And we can't be healthy in ministry unless we have a healthy soul. So that is one of my favorite books, and really anything by John Ortberg.
Love it. What best podcast you're listening to? If you listen to podcasts,
I'm listening to. Yeah, I love Propel. Women in Leadership. They have a podcast they put out, and I also love Craig Groeschel podcast, leadership podcast.
Good stuff. What are some of your favorite tools that are helping you be productive in your personal life?
So there's a book called Getting Things Done, and that has been we've actually institutionalizing that on our team. That be the tools that they use and the philosophy behind getting things done. That is on the executive side of things. That is been an amazing tool and been transformative in our leadership and our leadership team here. So as far as productivity, was that productivity?
Yeah. Any tools that you're using, the book's great. Yeah.
That's great. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I guess this is more of a deeper question, but how have you learned to handle and process pain as a leader? Obviously in ministry, you have to walk people through their darkest moments. How do you refresh from that and then take care of your soul?
So there's two kinds of pain, the pain that we carry for other people, and that takes time and intentionality. And so I think that the fact that we are giving out as pastors and leaders, giving out and walking people through some of their darkest times is really guarding your times of replenishment with the Lord. And sometimes it's not just about that 20 minutes in the morning getting started, but there are times and seasons when you need extended time, and you need to figure out what it is that fills your soul, and make sure that that you're filling your life on a regular basis with those things that fill your soul. So those extended times of prayer and with the Lord. And I know that Matt and Sarah are great about this. They actually, on their team, for all of their lead team, they're sending their team away for 2-day retreats, those soul health retreats that I think are so important. The other part is the pain of sometimes in ministry of being misunderstood and, investing your life into people. And then they, you're like, you think they're family, and then they switch churches and, and team, people that are close to you that feel a call to go somewhere else. And it can feel like betrayal. Right. So I think, again, this comes from experience. And I wish I knew this early on. That, to hold people with an open hand, and to recognize that, that even though someone's not part of your church or your maybe staff team, but they're always family. And we always say around here, to leave the back porch light on, and the door unlocked for people to be able to be family. So when you're navigating through those, to keep that perspective that when they leave here, they're going to be family. And I think some of the pain of the people that stay, that one thing that I've had to learn is to get over things quick, not to hold on to offenses, and when you find yourself, holding on, to really bring those to the Lord, because we're not going to make it for the long term, because the pain of ministry can start eroding your heart, and we need to guard our hearts, from the erosion that can happen, from the pain that happens in relationships and ministry. And I think we have to, get over things quick. Don't let the sun go down, on our anger. And for me, it's also been learning how to have hard conversations, to be able to restore relationships and keep relationships strong and healthy.
That's excellent. A little more personal. If you can go back to have coffee with your 20-year-old self, what would you tell her? I would tell her that have the hard conversations. If I were to say there was one lid on my leadership for several years, I think, again, growing up as a church girl, I thought that by keeping quiet and by staying silent when conflict came, that I was being a peacemaker, and I was actually being a peace faker. Because I allowed the things to stir, I allowed the conflict to go on. I allowed relationships to go downhill because I was too fearful to have the hard conversations, because when you think about it, when you're talking about peacemaking, it's about restoring a relationship. It's not about resolving issues, but sometimes you have to resolve issues to restore relationships. And I had to learn, this is something I'm not great at, but I would say it's been my biggest growth in the last 10 years in leadership, is how to have the hard conversations, how to have the hard conversations with my staff, how to have the hard conversations with my husband, how to have the hard conversations with people who may be going off track or just may need to be confronted on certain issues in their lives. And I usually start those conversations like this. Hey, I want you to know I'm not very good at this, but the relationship that we have means so much to me that I'm willing to be awkward and enter into an awkward conversation because I care enough about this relationship. And I think that learning the tools of being of being a peacemaker and not a peace faker, because many of us fall on one end of the spectrum. We're either a fighter or we're a fleer, and both can enter into both can lead to unresolved conflict. A fighter can say things that can never be unsaid, and a fleer can never say things that need to be said. And the only way that we're going to be able to to make it the long haul in relationships is to learn how to do that well. And I think that I really believed that if you were in the right place with the right people doing the right things, that you weren't going to have conflict. And I think that's the church myth. You think that if you're on a church staff, with the amazing Christian people spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ, that you're not going to have conflict. And the truth is, conflict isn't the absence of unity. Conflict is the opportunity
for unity. It's the opportunity to love people well and to lead them into unity. We don't have to agree on everything, to be in unity. And I think that that's so important because unity is such a high value. We have a value here that we value unity. So we can't tolerate unresolved conflict, right?
That's so good. I need that. I'm more like you. So yeah, but I'm learning. Final two questions. Just one, John Maxwell always says, people are going to summarize your life in one sentence. Pick it now. What do you want your one sentence to be at the end of your life that people say about you at your funeral?
Wow. That's a hard one. Let's see.
Or what do you want said of you? It could be more than one sentence.
I think that she loved God well. She loved her family well. She loved her spiritual family well. And she had fun doing it.
I love that.
That's just off the top of my head. I didn't get to prepare for that one. I might have a better one that I want you to read at a future, podcast.
Sure. And then for everyone who's listening to this podcast and they're like, wow, this is amazing. How can they connect with you? How can they connect with Christ Fellowship? How can we get behind what you're doing, serve you, and pray for you and Todd?
Okay, so if you want to get connected with me or the church, we're at gochristfellowship.com. You can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at CF Impact. C is in Charlie, F is in Frank, Impact, that stands for Christ Fellowship. And for myself, for me personally, I'm on Instagram, Jewel_Mullins. And yeah, so we're going to be having a church conference coming up in February, and you can find out more about that at gochristfellowship.com. We're going to be doing that mid-February, and mid-February is a great time for all of you up north to come visit South Florida. And you may actually feel called here once you're here.
That's great. Anything else you want to leave leaders with today?
Yeah, just really an honor, to do this, and I love what you're doing, investing in the next generation of leaders. But it's building church. Someone asked us a couple months back. They said, what would you do if you didn't have to worry about finances, and if your life was already set out before you? What would you do with the rest of your life? And without hesitation, we would do what we're doing right now, because building church and building God's kingdom, there is no greater privilege than this. There is no greater privilege than preparing the bride of Christ for his return and preparing the next generation to take over and steward their generation with the amazing ministry that we get to do. And so when Jesus was instructing his disciples in the book of Luke, and he said, when it's all been said and done, that what you need to say is that, we were only servants just doing our job, right? And that's not exactly the translation, but when you think about what Jesus did for us, by giving his life, so that we could have eternal life and we could have an abundant life here on earth. And you think about that he's handed us the privilege of continuing the master's work here on earth, right? That we get to do this, that we get to bring healing to sick people, that we get to bring the message of restoration and redemption, that we get to feed the poor, and that we get to make disciples for Christ. I mean, it just is no greater privilege. And I think sometimes in church work, we can get caught up, in making sure that we have a great retirement package, making sure that we get paid for the overtime hours that we've spent. And at the end of the day, we're just servants and stewards, right? And that we get to do this. Ministry really is what we get to do. It's not what we have to do. There's lots of, job openings at Starbucks and at Walmart, but this is a privilege, what we get to do. And I love that we get to do it with people like you, Doug, and, and for the leaders that you're able to impact. So thank you for the privilege.
Yeah. And thank you for your faithfulness for 30 years and looking forward to following the rest of your journey as well.
Thank you.
Listening to my interview with with Julie. You can find ways to connect with her and links to everything that we discussed and more at l3leadership.org/episode 158. Again, this is part 2 of a 2-part interview. If you'd like to go back and listen to part 1, which I highly encourage you to, you can find that in episode number 157 of the L3 Leadership Podcast. If this podcast added value to your life, it would mean the world to me if you'd subscribe and leave a rating and review. It really does help us make a difference. And also, share this episode on social media. Share it on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, everywhere you can. It really does make a difference. Thank you so much. I want to thank our other sponsor, BAB Inc. They're an insurance broker based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and they're led by my friend Russell Livingston, who has a huge passion for developing next-generation leaders, and they're just doing some really unique things in the insurance space. So if your organization has any insurance needs, go to babbins.com. That's BABBINS.com. Lastly, if you want to stay in touch with us and everything that we're doing here at L3 Leadership, just go to l3leadership.org and sign up for our email list, and you will stay up to date on a consistent basis through our emails. As always, I like to end with a quote, and I'll quote Julie again in this one. She said this, and I just love this. She said, "Excellence increases influence." Excellence increases influence, and I encourage you to try to be excellent in everything that you do. Why? Because excellence increases influence. So good, Julie. Thanks for listening and being a part of L3 Leadership. Laura and I appreciate you so much, and we'll talk to you next episode.